Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television with me, Frank Pereira. In a significant breakthrough on the GST front, the centre and the states reached a consensus on the contentious dual control issue on Monday, preparing ground for the rollout of the biggest tax reform from July 1st. The centre would assess 50% of the SSCs over 1.5 crore rupees annual turnover and the states the other 50%. As much as 90% of the SSCs with less than 1.5 crore rupees annual turnover will come under the states and the balance 10% under the centre. The consensus at the GST Council gives industry the much needed clarity and additional time for preparing for the reform. On this edition of The Big Picture, we'll take a look at the contours of the goods and services tax regime approved by the GST Council, how it is different from the original proposal and what will be its impact on the Indian economy. Joining me on the program today are Ajay, former Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, A.K. Bhattacharya, Editorial Director of the Business Standard, and Nitin Desai, former Economic Chief Advisor, Government of India. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on the program. Mr. Dua, let me begin with you, of course, and ask you, how is what was agreed upon on Monday at the 9th GST Council meeting different from the original proposal of GST?
I think the originally when it was envisaged way back in 2004, the first attempt was a very simplified version of GST. It was envisaged to have either one or two slabs, rates, not 4 and the separate cess or 0. It was also thought that the rates which will be there would be fairly modest, not going up to 28% and then plus cesses, etc. and other items. Third, I think at that point of time, while it was subsumed that 13 or 14 taxes would levied by the centre and state would come in together, the role of the centre was envisaged in the earlier versions of the law as well as in the law which was put before the Parliament, was much more giving a higher role to the, or a bigger role to the central government than the states. What has happened now is not everything got decided yesterday, but in the 8 meetings earlier and the 9th yesterday, we have, instead of 1 rate, we have 6 rates. Instead of having a moderate rate, we have a rate which goes up to 28% plus on certain demerit goods, extras on that. Also, and I would say that was probably the only way out to have a breakthrough which was achieved yesterday. The role of the states has been increased considerably. The dual control issue, which was bogging down the negotiations, that seems to have been resolved to the satisfaction of almost all states other than one, where also the other one didn't walk out. The only one left out, that's the Bengal representative, didn't walk out. He, of course, thereafter clarified after the finance minister had held his press conference and talked about the consensus, saying no, this agreement was only on service tax, about 90-10, not about 1.5 crore assessment, which is entirely with the states. I would say the certain things have moved for the better. In certain places, the changes probably over time would have to be further changes would be required.
And fine-tuned.
Fine-tuned to achieve the optimum results
Indeed.
Of this new historic, I would call it, system of indirect taxes in the country.
Indeed. Mr. Desai, the coastal states have also been taken care of this time around, and this is something that has happened. Is it for the better or is it for the worse?
It's the present situation. It's the nautical states. What are we talking of? We're basically talking of fishing. The activity just within the 12-mile zone is essentially that, and it is at present also within the purview of the state. So it is actually something which doesn't mean a big change on present arrangements. I think Ajay has very clearly laid out the differences. One of the things which intrigues me is this business of 50% of the large SSs. And imagine this guy, he doesn't know whether he's going to be assessed by the Bihar administration or the central administration. Who knows? Maybe they will have some preferences, or if they get a kind administration, so many lottery lag gayi.
But isn't the software supposed to decide that 50-50 ratio?
Yes, but I as an individual don't know.
Yes.
Some software is going to decide as to whether I'm going to be assessed by this man in Patna or whether I'm going to be assessed by the central administration. So I would say that, and I think today somebody clarified that it won't necessarily change from year to year, that there will be stability for 2 or 3 years. I hope they're able to work this, because continuity is lost.
Sure.
The continuity, but here hopefully this may not matter too much if we have an integrated information system, which probably is essential anyhow, which is part of the deal, that there's an integrated information system. All of us, regardless of whether we are going to fall under the purview of a state assessor or a central assessor, will still have to upload our transactions data on a single system, and that probably will ensure that there isn't too much of a problem of continuity. But it's an intriguing way of handling things.
Okay.
That is all I can say, that I don't think we've ever had a situation in any other area where you actually will not know.
I think Mr. Dua wants to add something to what you just said and clarify something.
I think the one about the 12 nautical miles jurisdiction, it was all along recognized as a territory of the Union.
Union, yes. Not the state.
However, the states had been, by convention, no written delegation or others, they had been collecting tax on high seas sales. It is not merely fishing. A lot of wholesale trade, bulk trade in commodities in particular, oil, gas, coal, iron ore, etc., takes place in the high seas, because then the responsibility of getting it past the customs, paying the duties, etc., becomes of the buyer. That it is considerable would probably become evident from a statement which Dr. Amit Mitra made before the statement. He said, of the 11 states, most of us have have an income of 600 crores to 1100 to 1200 crore rupees a year. So you multiply that by 10, there is about 10,000 crores or 9,000 crores comes there. And I'm aware of myself, because I have also in government, for government undertakings, undertaken high seas sales, purchase, sold, etc., when I used to be associated with the company dealing with commodities. That apart, the issue of jurisdiction of interstate trade, IGST.
Yes.
The provision, what was agreed to yesterday, now that will have to be built into the law and the rules, is that in case of dispute between origin of, supply origin, whether it belongs to state X, whether it belongs to state Y, while the software would have certain basis for, background fed in, on the basis of it, it would choose. But if somebody wishes to dispute that, saying the computer is saying it's from state X, whereas it's more like state Y, it is very clearly provided for that the powers of mediation and deciding the state of origin would lie with the federal government, which in any case, the IGST income is to go to the federal government, not to the state governments.
Fair enough. Mr. Bhattacharya, let me bring you into the picture now. The government has been accused of taking such decisions unilaterally, but finally, is the government playing ball with the states, and are we seeing cooperative federalism?
Let me answer this question, but before, let me add to this coastal states debate. I think, this is, in my view, a major decision on the coastal states. And it will become even bigger when petroleum products come under GST. Right now, petroleum products is not coming under GST. So today, probably, it's the impact of this coastal states decision that it will go to the states is something that probably is being played down. But as and when, and that is what the Constitutional Amendment Bill actually provides, that petroleum products would come under GST, and that will be a decision taken by GST Council. So it doesn't require to go back to Parliament for ratification. So therefore, if you take into account all the crude oil imports and everything that happens is in high seas.
Yes.
So the entire thing, and that to my mind, going forward, can actually probably be a bone of contention between the center and the states, particularly because today, I think center hasn't realized what they have given up. So when tomorrow when petroleum products come under the purview, so it will be an issue. Your question on whether there has been a center has played ball with the states, I would say the manner in which they did some backroom consultation with a large number of states, and if I may say, probably it appeared to me that West Bengal got a little isolated. And I think it was definitely an outcome of clever pre-meeting consultation among other states, because remember there was this triumvirate of 3 states which were the chief opponents of what was happening on the GST Council, which is Delhi, you have got West Bengal and Kerala. Now we haven't heard anything from the Delhi representatives nor from the Kerala representative after yesterday's meeting. So it seems that the center has played its ball very well, and most importantly in my view, the manner in which the center decided to concede up to 90% of the SSCs with an annual turnover of less than 1.5 crore is something that speaks well. Not only is it a good decision, but it also is a practical and pragmatic decision for the center not to get into the smaller SSCs which has less than 1.5 crore. In any case, the state directorates and the excise directorates, the service tax directorates probably are better qualified to get into these small SSCs.
Indeed.
And the bigger SSCs, they have agreed to a 50% sharing, and that sharing will be done through a computer generated software. So which I think is it's a very after many such meetings which raise controversy after controversy, we have seen a meeting where there is some sort of clear direction, and most importantly, you have removed the uncertainty over the date.
Yes, indeed. That's extremely crucial.
Yes,
so
far,
yes, Mr. Desai.
This is probably the big payoff.
Big thing. Because
and 1st July is not bad.
Yeah, it is not bad because
industry is not ready for 1st April.
You have waited for 10 years for this thing, and by waiting for 3 more months, probably it may be an imperfect tax, but at least you have now clarity with the industrial units, the service units. They are all were unprepared for it, and everybody has welcomed this move by 3 months, which will give time, because there are a lot of issues still need to be resolved, which we can come to later.
Yes, which we'll get to those.
Basically, this point that is the 1st July. Remember this, today I saw one thing where the industry people said, please have the rules and regulations ready 3 months before implementation, so that it gives us time to get our systems in order.
Absolutely.
So I think this gives that space. 1st April would not have given that space, because they can't do the legislation before March.
That's right.
It's not possible to fine tune it before March. So I think this is a very good thing. I think in the response to your question, I think, yes, I would certainly give credit to the finance minister and the finance and his officials for pulling this off. I personally was a skeptic as to whether in our present political climate this would happen, but it has happened. So I think on that, but Ajay is also right that what we have got now is a somewhat not moth-eaten is too strong a word, but certainly something which is little less than desirable. Too many exemptions of petroleum products and so on. And issues like some which were mentioned just now, too many rates. So perhaps down the line it will get simplified. I think the economic impact of GST is profound.
But I will say that there are areas of concerns.
We'll come to those areas of concerns in just a bit. We'll take the debate forward.
Okay, fair enough.
Yes, but yes, Mr. Dua, you wanted to make a point.
The breakthrough to some extent, as has been pointed out, was certainly because this was a lot of preparatory work had been done. And if you would recall some of the reports which have come today, the proposal accepted finally is the one which was proposed by the representative of Tamil Nadu. And Tamil Nadu till recently was not entirely on board.
Yes.
Though they had problem of the chief minister not being well and others. So obviously after consultation, somebody had been selected to do the consultation with the states, probably prodded by the center, and that achieved the goal. Howsoever it may have happened, I think the central government has shown the generosity and the liberalism which was required for it to get a breakthrough in a very major tax reform. Had it stuck to its own guns, and looking at that, this was happening right at the back of our demonetization of the scale which we have seen.
We still haven't forgotten demonetization.
Yes, the states would not have come on board.
Sure.
Certainly a highly desirable step has been come through, but we got to be ensuring now that no other, see, today the states have agreed, the laws have to come before them within a month, then the states have to get those things passed from their own legislatures, every one of them.
Sure.
If that timeline goes, doesn't come out, it doesn't stick out, the rules and regulations which are to be made, the exercise will be probably taken if there is any amendment or somewhere, so the drafts will be ready. There is still a lot of work to be done.
Indeed. Work to be done. Mr. Bhattacharya, I'm going to come to you about what needs to be done and how we are going to do that. But before that, let me bring in S.K. Jindal, Chairman, ASSOCHAM Investment and Capital Markets into the debate as well. Welcome, Mr. Jindal. As far as the industry is concerned, you finally have a deadline now, which is of July 1st. Do you welcome it? How does the industry and really how is it going to impact industry and trade now that you have a deadline and you can prepare for GST?
We really welcome it. It's a very positive move which has taken place. Few days back, when we were discussing here only, it was no more in sight when it will happen, or it will happen or it will not happen. We discussed to that extent. And now we see that it is happening on 1st of July. So all the faith has come back, and now industry is very happy and upbeat about it, that it will see the day of light and the things will look into right perspective. So we welcome this step, and it's a big achievement in a very short time of these 2 days, that the things look that they are doable now.
Sure. All right. Things look like they are doable, but what are the stumbling blocks that you foresee in the near future, Mr. Bhattacharya?
Well, I would only list 3 major areas of concern. Number one is that a lot of work still remains to be done, and there I would put the task of deciding on tax rates of individual items as the biggest task. And I only hope that the tax bureaucracy does not take charge, the politician does not take charge, and instead the best interest of creating a simple, transparent tax structure. Please remember, there are, as Mr. Dua said, there are about 6 rates. If we include the zero rate and the 5%, 8%, 12%, 18%, 28%. On top of that, there is a cess rate.
Sin goods.
Now, the lobbying activity will be huge. So, therefore, you need, ramrod straight tax bureaucracy, along with the support of the political classes, to make sure that this exercise of determining the rates are done without any detriment to the industry, the trade, and the consumer. I understand the lobbying has already begun, and I think it's important that the tight control is maintained and a vigil is kept. Number 2, from now to July 1, there is one date that worries me, which is March 11, when the election results of the 5 states will be declared. Now, it is possible that the results may be such that the GST agenda may once again get a rude jolt. And I think it will be important for the finance ministry, the finance minister, and the government to stay firm to this deadline and this commitment that July 1 should remain July 1, and it should not see another further postponement, which in theory is possible.
Sure.
So therefore, the March 11 results should not be allowed to upset the calendar. And number 3 is the question of the IGST, and the question of the 3 different laws that will have to be framed and by all the states will have to be passed. Now, I think there was a time, let's say last year, after the Constitutional Amendment Bill, the government really monitored, particularly the BJP ruled states, and made sure that all those states, at least 50% of the states, pass them so that constitution amendment would be, task would be complete. Now, similarly, you need all the states to be on board, and you only have one budget session in between.
Indeed.
So therefore, the states will have to be kept on board, and the center will have to play a proactive role to make sure the states are also pass their laws so that GST can be launched from July 1.
Talking about the budget session, let's talk about the budget. Mr. Desai, can we see any kind of a roadmap, any kind of a direction as far as the budget is
I
concerned?
think one thing is that clearly the indirect tax part of the budget will be a little open-ended, because obviously with the GST now scheduled for 1st of July, he cannot fiddle around with individual rates and so on, because it makes no sense, because on 1st of July, a different system will be there. Here, I hope that the point which was just mentioned, Bhattacharya just mentioned, that the lobbying for put me in the 8% bracket, put me in the 5% bracket, that's the unfortunate part. That's always happens here, and I think let's hope that that can be taken care of, because it's not just the industry groups. Here you will get the states also acting.
Absolutely.
The states which have a predominance of a particular industry will lobby for one thing, etc. So that is a troublesome thing, which I hope they will be able to resolve. They've at least specified a theology for it, which is that it must fulfill demerit goods, luxury goods, basic necessities, etc. So that type of thing is done. But that will be the, I hope that will not be a stumbling block. I'm a little worried about his March 11th the deadline. But the best thing is if they can nail it down before that, because right now one phrase which worried me slightly in the communique was, they said broad agreement. Now that word broad is a little disturbing.
Indeed. Yes.
On the budget, let me just add
quick
one point
yes.
to Mr. Desai's point, Dr. Desai's point, is that the budget probably can play a very interesting role if he gives some indication of the GST structure by aligning some of the rates to closer to what it be. For the service tax is a classic area
example, yes.
where he can actually take it forward to maybe 18% or maybe halfway down, so that the impact, sudden impact from 14.5% to straight 18%, if it is so, is not sudden. So it can be a alignment exercise.
Mr. Dua, the first year after the implementation of GST, experts say is going to be the most crucial year. So, what do you expect to see? What do you foresee once GST is in place?
Two things. One, having a multiplicity of rates, and the rates being what's being talked of is aligning them to the current rates for most items, which means the rationalization of rates which was expected once you have a GST, because there is a credit set off being given, so the destination rates should have been lower because the inputs have been already paid for. That would not happen. What would instead happen is you paying for some time the raw material rates as well as the end product rate, because the system, everybody is not yet on board in terms of registration. The GST network will be still under trial, experimentation and consolidating over time. There could be a higher incidence of taxation temporarily, and that could make for greater inflationary pressures than had been envisaged. That's number one. Number two, and that's been the experience in most countries at the time of introduction of the GST, that rationalization took time. And in our case, this inflation is something which we need to be worried about, because that's been the cause hitherto for a lot of things, including the interest rates and our productivity, competitiveness, etc. But more important than that, to my mind, is we could see, along with what we have seen recently, that the demand from the states for compensation, which is an issue which has already been raised, is going to be much higher than originally envisaged. So the classification, which is rates classification, which is going to be taking place, could be that more and more items are kept nearer in the higher tax brackets, so that the compensation required to be given from the center is less.
Indeed. I've got 3 minutes left on the program, so I'd like to get final comments from all my guests. Mr. Jindal, as far as the industry is concerned, how is it going to cope with the GST? How is it going to suddenly start paying these higher taxes?
Because they will be level playing for everybody, larger base of tax compliant society. So all these things will add to the sustainability of this. Earlier, lot of business was happening without taxes, which was making it difficult for tax compliant people to survive. So these kind of things, now tax collection base has increased, tax collections have increased, tax compliance has increased. So all these things will make it level playing. When it is level playing, then you don't have to worry about those who were not paying taxes. So I think it will work very well, and especially with these kind of macros which we have, what we expect in the budget is that they will make it more for employment, more moves to be taken for employment, manufacturing to be increased, and all these things will support, and some big ticket reforms also which will support manufacturing in the years to come.
All right. All right. Quick closing comments from all my guests as well. Mr. Bhattacharya, how is GST going to affect this, the finances of the centre and the state?
Well, I think I am not really worried about GST affecting the resources of the centre and the state. There may be the first year the hiccups, which normally happens, but I don't think that should be a cause for concern. And I think the real dangers, the areas that the GST Council should avoid are mainly two. It will probably be suicidal to put more items under the higher category of rates in the hope that compensation will be less, because that will only actually reduce your tax collections because of the rates are higher, the cost implications and the overall the spin-off of that will be bad. And I would suggest that the GST Council should keep in mind to minimize and maybe eliminate all items that are exempted, because there is a tremendous demand to create more items that are exempted from this. I think that will be very sad, because as far as possible, items should be brought under the GST chain so that the set of facilities can be enjoyed by more players in the economic value chain.
Sure. Mr. Desai, you have quick final closing comments.
I would certainly focus on be careful with the high rates, because one thing you are going to see is when consumers for the first time see the total indirect tax bill on their bill, there will be a bit of a reaction. Today it's all hidden in different places, you see. But now when I see that one number, 28%, you'll see a lot of resistance and reaction. So I would urge that don't put too many things in that bracket.
Indeed. And Mr. Dua, close the show for us with your final closing comments.
I think we are going into an area for which considerable deliberations over the years have taken place. So we are not really going into totally uncharted areas. We have global experience, but if pragmatism of the kind which was seen yesterday is continued, we should be able to get over this period of pain which normally follows GST fairly well, and that period could also be compressed rather than being left as elsewhere it was 1 to 2 years, and politically that will be beneficial for the ruling parties everywhere, whether it's at the center of the state, to have this period as short as possible.
Indeed. We're completely out of time on the program today. On that note, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Ajay Dua, SK Jindal, AK Bhattacharya and Nitin Desai, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for watching.